Oh, cool. This is being live streamed. Okay. Alrighty. All right. Well, are we gonna wait a few minutes or Alaikum assalam, Auntie?
I don't think it would hurt to wait maybe 2 to 3 more minutes. Oh, nope,
Yeah.
sorry. They said you can begin. Go ahead.
Oh, I can begin. Okay, mashallah. Okay, thank you. Alhamdulillah. All right. Ramadan Mubarak, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, you are all doing well. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Let me just check the chat right quick. Great, awesome. So welcome, inshallah. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about nutrition and planning so that we can get the most out of our worship in our blessed month of Ramadan. And today really we're just going to be sharing some information around, nutrition, planning very well for the month of Ramadan so that we can free up some time so that we can get the best out of our worship. If you all have any questions, please feel free to interact. This is intended to be an interactive session, and we'll just kind of share perspectives and kind of what works for the community. And I'm going to share my screen. I think I'm going to do a very simple share. And then that way I'll have access to my many screens. Let's see. Okay, great. All right, so inshallah, as we begin.
Mama, it's not hot.
It is hot. I'm gonna mute a little bit. Okay, great. All right, so let me just share my screen here and let me know when you all can see it. All right, awesome. Can you all see my screen there?
Yes.
Okay, great, awesome. All right, alhamdulillah. All right, well, welcome. Today we'll get started. Ramadan Mubarak. My name is YaQutullah Ibraheem Muhammad. I'm a registered dietitian out of Atlanta. I guess I've been practicing since 2007 in different spaces. So we're just going to share with you today a little bit. So Ramadan Revive, it's interesting. This was born out of a concept a couple years ago, and that I collaborated with a sister out of San Diego, and they wanted a dietitian to come in and kind of talk about nutrition. So we've continued it, and I believe this is our second year. So when Aisha reached out and Sadie Kaba reached out, it was kind of like, okay, great. We're going to make sure we share this information kind of across the board. So Ramadan Revive, right? Really with the tradition of, Ramadan and looking at how we can get in the spirit of Ramadan. Ramadan, of course, is not just about fasting of the stomach. It's really about spiritual renewal. And how do we get to the spiritual renewal? A lot of times we are talking about food, we are talking about nourishment and nutrition, but at the same time, we want to make sure that it's not just the fasting of the stomach, right? But it's the entire mind, body, and spirit. And how do we get there, right? How do we free up some of this time? Because a lot of times in Ramadan, we get very busy with hosting. We get busy with, iftar sponsorships at the masjid, iftar invitations and things like that. You also want to make sure that you're making time, to really, hey, I'm going to get my juz read for the day. I'm going to, get into the extra, nafil prayer, make sure I get my zikr done, make sure I get my prayers done in the scheme of things, right? I remember last year, Sheikha Aisha Prime, she was talking about the importance also of not just, in Ramadan, we fast from the stomach, of course, no food from, dawn till dusk, but also making sure that we're really getting the best out of Ramadan and that we're planning for it, right? So a lot of it is planning for it, right? Whatever we do in life, we want to make sure that we renew our intentions, right? And that we're looking at the goals that we want for this year and how we want to improve from last year. So it's always an improvement. It's a constant improvement that we are seeking, right? Preparing the mind the body for Ramadan. And then we're going to be looking at proponents or components of meal prep, right? Very simple ways to get in fruits and vegetables, and then really looking at also ways to prevent food waste, right? And a lot of times we get super excited and we're like, oh, we're in Ramadan, but how do we get to the point where we can continue this even outside of Ramadan? All right. The 6 days that we fast, inshallah, in the month of Shawwal, right? And how can we, continue or take as much of Ramadan as we can with us kind of throughout the rest of the year, right? So really also kind of looking at what does it, mean, when we're talking about Ramadan. Some people go into Ramadan with different intentions. We go into Ramadan with things that we want to accomplish. And then, what does that all look like? And then, people in Ramadan take Ramadan for, I guess, different reasons, right? If some people want to lose weight, right? Some people might go into Ramadan and just say, I'm going to start my diet in Ramadan, right? But we want to make sure that we're not only intentional, but we're focusing on the best things within Ramadan, right? So looking at, healthy relationships with food, how do we go about balancing that as we strive for balance and fueling our body, and then looking at healthy relationships with food, right? So I work a lot with women who have eating disorders. I also work with, women who have, military sexual trauma. And then I also work with many of our elders in our community. Okay, so I have a very interesting set of individuals that I work with. And they all bring very different perspectives and life experiences, right? So we have to make sure that we're kind of looking at it from where you are and where we're meeting you. Making sure that we're practicing mindful eating as part of your strategy in Ramadan and beyond, and just being mindful. I had a conversation with a sister, and we were talking about mindfulness and the different tips, the different components of mindfulness that our beloved Prophet Muhammad always, incorporated, right? Very simple mindful eating techniques like washing your hands, sitting when we're eating, making sure that we, Bismillah, and we pray over the food that we're eating, making sure that we're eating, in company, right? And we're sitting down and we're eating with our right hand. So these may sound or seem a very commonplace, but you would be surprised. And just, making sure that we strive to incorporate some of those mindful eating strategies, okay? And then within our group, we also want to make sure that we're looking at Ramadan suhoor tips, right? Understanding the wisdom of suhoor, why we eat suhoor in the morning. Of course, our beloved Prophet Muhammad he took it as a practice of the sunnah to make sure that you have suhoor, right? It's not only beautiful blessing in it, but it actually helps you with your fast during the day, right? So you want to make sure that you understand the wisdom of suhoor. You make sure that, you set your alarm, or maybe you're already up because you're doing tahajjud, right? This year we partnered with our Ramadan Revive group. We did a buddy system, right? And it's basically on WhatsApp. And they're on Pacific West Coast time, and we're on Eastern Standard. So we're up. We're doing our suhoor. Some of them may be up, but we're basically kind of sharing perspective, how we're going about our day, maybe posting some pictures of what we had. A lot of it is really just looking at, the intentionality of it all and building community around Ramadan. This is what we look forward to in Ramadan, connecting with each other, right? Making sure that we have a very simple plan, a simple strategy. A lot of it is planning, right? So we may see something that we want, or we may see something that we want to do. The question is, we set our intentions and then we set our goals and we plan accordingly. But what does that actually look like? Do you need a support system? Do you need a buddy? Do you need accountability to make it happen, right? And then what does that look like for your overall schedule? We also want to look at, tips for keeping it simple, okay? Of course, renewing your intentions, looking at starting everything we do, as simple as it may be, with Bismillah. Looking at lifestyle, looking at behavior, looking at dietary modifications that we all take on our journey, okay? And then planning. A lot of it is planning, looking at in Ramadan, right? So we get out, we have our schedule. We usually have a family meeting before Ramadan, and we plan it out. How many days are we eating at home? Are we sponsoring any meals at the masjid? Do we have any iftar invitations that we need to honor where we'll, take food to someone else's home, and really look at what your schedule looks like for Ramadan. Making a plan, making a list, making sure you keep it simple, okay? And that you're including, the different components that are gonna best help to nourish you, okay? And then, planning, looking at what your recipes might look like for the week, okay, versus the weekend where you may have a little bit more time. And then making sure that you are also looking at really simple meal planning steps and strategies, 30-minute meal prep. Okay, you know your schedule better than anyone else and what that looks like. If you see a recipe that may be, very cool, and we have Jewels of the Tariqa, where we have some aunties that are always posting, these recipes that look amazing, right? And I'm like, wow, okay, I really want to do this one. So what does that actually look like as far as planning? What do I need to have on hand? During the week, I may do 30-minute prep ideas, or I may meal prep and then just already have everything sealed up, marinating in a Ziploc bag. And then the day of, I put it in a crock pot or the oven or however I'm going to cook it, right? Looking at what that actually looks like, right? Are you shopping sales? Are you doing coupons or local? Are you doing co-op options? And what I challenged our group to do this year is actually take an inventory, right? Before Ramadan came. You can do it now. It's never late. It's never too late. But take an inventory of what you actually have in your fridge, right? Or what you actually have in your freezer or your pantry, right? And say, you know what, some of these can go, they're a little old, or hey, this is something I have frozen that I can maybe take out and pre-prep, right? And then looking at really, FIFO, first in, first out. What am I going to use? What am I going to discard? And helping to identify what you already have on hand versus what you may need to purchase, right? And then looking at your prep, what does that look like? And looking at your cooking environment. What appliances am I going to use versus going out and maybe buying something new and having to learn, kind of how to use it, and identifying recipes that you're actually going to use with that, right? So really being intentional, planning for it, which is a big piece of it, and then going from there. I wanted to take questions, I guess, at this point to kind of have a feel of the room, and see if anyone has any questions or anything to maybe perhaps lend to the conversation. All right. And you can always drop questions in the chat. I'm also sharing some resources in the chat, and I'm navigating between two screens, so please be patient and bear with me. I actually have a Google Drive, and it has a ton of information in there, and I really want to make sure that I share this with you, especially as we get into the next part of the presentation, and we're looking at components of a healthy suhoor, right? So when we look at components of a healthy suhoor, and let me see if I can navigate this. Yeah, there it is. So if we're looking at components of a healthy suhoor, I actually wanted to go over this with you all on my drive. This is basically kind of looking at what we're going to include, right? So what are the 4 basic components? Of course, we're going to talk about hydration. We're going to include water and things like that, things that are going to lend electrolytes. But we really want to look at what are the main components when it comes to macronutrients. And these are going to be like your complex carbohydrates. These may take, different shapes and forms depending on what you're able to tolerate, what you're able to eat, and your food preferences. And then also looking at high fiber foods, right? So during the month, you want to make sure that, of course, you're looking at, flax seeds, apples, whole grains, things like that you can do as far as your high fiber components. And there's so many different ones, nuts, and then looking at what protein options you're going to have, right? Whether they're plant-based proteins, whether they are animal proteins, and then making sure you have a nice, healthy, balanced mix, right? And then healthy fats. What are some of the healthy fats that you want to incorporate as far as your suhoor and iftars? This year is funny because in our group, we were talking about how flax seeds and avocados and eggs are taking kind of the front seat, right? They're quick, they're easy to prepare. And then, of course, for suhoor, you can also do things like, different types of fish, and, you can eat suhoor. And then if you want, for iftar and dinner, you may have some of the same components, right? So just kind of looking at what that may look like, okay? See if we can get back. Okay. So really just looking at what those look like. And let me know if you guys see that. I believe in the chat, I posted it. Let's see. I'll look at that. And I'll just post it in our chat so we can see it. There it is. Okay, great. So that's kind of some of the information there that I wanted to share around the healthy components of suhoor. And then this actual slide here, I actually took from the Ramadan Reset Guidebook that we did with Amana Fitness. And this basically just looks at some iftar options, or suhoor options rather, that you can do. So your water, of course, in the morning. If you're taking any specific vitamins, mineral supplements, of course, you would include that. And then looking at your cereals, your vegetables, your soups. I know here in our house, we're big on soups, like lentil soups and fava beans and things like that, just to make sure that we're getting the protein. Very simple. Yusuf loves them. So he'll eat soups and we'll just kind of, eat that for suhoor, and we'll also have it for iftar, just because after a long day of fasting, it's nice to have something, soups, teas, things like that on your stomach to actually help prepare for solid foods if you're going to be eating those. But this is just a sample from the Ramadan Reset Guidebook, and that's available at ramadanreset.com. So that's, another piece of it that we can actually kind of look at around planning specifically for suhoor. And then also looking at beneficial foods from the Quran and prophetic tradition. What type of foods are consumed and what type of foods can we actually incorporate. And it's interesting because in the, I think it's the community, some of this information was also posted. Then looking at Quran and what foods are actually highlighted in Quran, right? And what foods can we, incorporate in the spirit of, balance and moderation, and making sure that we get these foods in for many different reasons. Of course, the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber that we can get from these foods, but just making sure that it's, a conscious effort and intention to include these types of foods, okay? When we talk about suhoor recipes, we have different recipes. We find recipes we like. We have our rotation recipes that we enjoy, that we know, hey, I can prepare this in 30 minutes, or this is a favorite that our family will eat. But it really just depends on, what your recipe rotation looks like. And these are from the Ramadan Reset Guidebook resource that we have. Planning, right? Not to skip suhoor. I'm sorry, let me go back. Not to skip suhoor. Make sure that we're consuming fresh fruits and vegetables, and then also making sure that we're hydrating during the non-fasting hours, right? A lot of us go through this caffeine withdrawal, and I've heard it from many of my sisters and my clients and things like that. And, how do we go and have, the coffee? It's not that you necessarily have to cut the coffee out. It may just be that you cut back the amount that you're actually consuming. So the recommendation is about 300 to 400 milligrams of caffeine. So you're actually looking at about 1 to 2 cups, depending on the type of coffee and the amount of caffeine in it, right? So, really just looking at what that might look like. And then really kind of going from there. Meal planning. Of course, we want to celebrate our foods. We want to celebrate our cultural foods, the foods that we enjoy. But we also want to make sure that we practice moderation. And I had a sister, she did a Zumbusa Zoom party where everybody got together and we made samosas together. But it was very cool because you had different ways that you can make your samosas, right? And we want to make sure that, hey, we're enjoying the foods, the types of foods we like, but we're just doing it in moderation, okay? And kind of enjoying our cultural foods. And this is just a sample iftar meal that we put together, very simple, looking at, your dates, your water, your lentil soup, and the difference between iftar and actual dinner. So when we talk about the iftar, just breaking our fast and then coming back for the dinner part of it, and then looking at, okay, your protein, your whole grain, high fiber, complex carbs, and then your fruits and vegetables that you can actually incorporate, right? And then looking at maybe a smaller meal before bedtime, very small, maybe protein, maybe a fruit, vegetable, things like that, and make sure that you're, hydrating, between your prayers and things like that. Are there any questions so far?
Salam alaikum. YaQutullah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
Okay, I have you on a speaker. I'm gonna have to leave shortly, so I want to go ahead and get my thing in. I had questions, but you kind of touched on most of them. I was thinking about Taraweeh prayer and what nutritional substance we need to have to make sure that we're making it through the prayer, because actually I think it was maybe just I guess the second night, I was at one iftar at one masjid, and then I left to go to my local masjid where they were doing Taraweeh prayer. And then I came late, but then within the second rak'ah, I felt lightheaded and I literally had to salam out. And I usually don't do, I'm usually fine with my Taraweeh prayers. And so I was thinking and I do know that, I came from an iftar that was at the Zawiya. So we were eating I don't know, Sunnah style or in the group, with the African food. And I probably didn't get enough. And so I'm wondering if you have any tips about making sure that we have the stamina for the Taraweeh prayer and what we need to make sure that we consumed for that. Yeah. And then the other thing was, no, we'll just start with that one. I think the other ones you kind of touched on.
Okay. So I don't know the whole situation, but you want to make sure that you're hydrated, right? So after you're fasting the entire day, make sure that you get enough, of course, to eat, but you're also hydrating. So it's not just, okay, I'm eating, making sure you hydrate. And then when we start Ramadan, there's an adjustment period, right? Every year there's an adjustment period. So you just want to make sure that you are definitely, patient and compassionate with yourself. And then making sure you're getting enough to eat, right? Making sure you're taking your time to digest your food. So we're running from one iftar to the next iftar, and then we jump into the prayer, right? Just, be mindful about how much we're eating, how much we're hydrating, and then really just kind of taking our time and not doing too much too soon. And adjust and kind of check in with yourself and say, hey, how am I feeling? Am I getting kind of what I need? Did I, incorporating the different components and making sure that you are getting enough. Because sometimes, you'll eat from, of course, the side that's closest to you. But if you think, hey, I really didn't get enough to eat, then you want to make sure that you're packing something with you, right? So sometimes I'll take nuts or seeds with me to the masjid, or I'll take my water and I'll have my electrolyte and my noon in it, right? So that I can drink it on the go, just to really try to help with the balance and kind of adjust or readjust as needed.
Shukran for that. One other thing, I was thinking about kids, and you have children that have reached the age of puberty where they should be fasting. You have those who are trying to practice. So when they're ready, when it's time, and, they don't have the same discipline that adults have or the same wisdom and knowledge about what the nutrition should be. Do you have experience with working with children as far as little tips for them to make sure that they are sustained? I mean, especially if they're playing sports and different things of that nature, or should they not be fasting if they're playing sports, if they don't really have to? That's a question I have around kids' nutrition.
That's a really great question. And that question came up in our moms group. So it really just depends on the family, depends on the child. We have resources where we can say, hey, this is kind of, what they want to eat. If they're going to be fasting, looking at, are they going to fast? This is their first time fasting. Are they going to fast the entire day, or are they going to fast up until maybe Zuhr, right? And then looking at what sports, they're involved in, and then making sure that you actually put together a plan that's going to help support that, right? And that's a whole conversation. A lot of the families will have a conversation and say, okay, what does the strategy look like for this Ramadan? If they're really not required to fast at that point, then you may, say, okay, well, let's try it maybe for a few hours and see how you feel, or not fast at all. But it really just depends, kind of grooming them and getting them kind of used to that schedule. And it's a process, right? But you have to kind of try it on for size and see how it works and then adjust accordingly. And some others, you guys may have your own experiences. I don't have older children that play sports. Mine is a toddler. But really just looking at, what that looks like. What are the requirements versus what they're actually going to be doing for Ramadan, and then looking at what the strategy looks like as far as snacks and hydration, and really kind of building that plan out and having conversations around that. I hope I answered your question. If you all have any other questions, just drop them in the chat. And I do realize you have to leave, Aisha. Inshallah, we'll connect. Okay, so we have a question. What is a good plant source for fat other than avocado? Most people reach for the avocado because it's simple and things like that. There are definitely different alternatives. And I actually put together a graphic, informational graphic that looked at protein alternatives and plant-based fats and things like that for the most part. So avocado is good. You also have, things like nut butters, right? Plant source for fat as well as protein. And then you also have your nuts, your seeds, your beans, and things like that. You have your flax seeds, your chia seeds. There's so many different types of options that you have. It's just a matter of kind of laying it out, right? And looking at what your strategy is going to be or what your plan is going to be. We have that as part of a resource packet that we developed. And inshallah, I can drop that in the chat. I'm trying to see maybe the best way to share the resources because it's a file folder. I'll have to come back to that and kind of think about what the best way to share those resources with you all would be. The other one I wanted to talk a little bit about, alhamdulillah, thank you, was the mix and match dinner plate, right? So the mix and match dinner plate, I work with Cook Smarts and I'm an affiliate. And what we do is it's educational, like cooking company, and they have all these resources on how to meal prep really, I guess, strategically, and making sure that you really kind of get the best use of your time. And the mix and match dinner plate is basically a template that you can use where you can basically prepare everything for dinner in 30 minutes, and then you add maybe a side salad to it, right? So what I wanted to show you all, and I think I can drop this one in the chat for the mix and match. Let me see what this would look like. Ah, there it is. All right, so this one, and I'll just drop it in the chat so you all can see it as we follow along. All right, there it is. So I'll highlight this one just to kind of look at it. But basically what it is it's a dinner plate and basically says, hey, when we're going to mix and match, we want to look at what types of dressing we're going to be using, how we're going to marinate our foods if you're doing specific marinades, and then identifying what your combos are, right? So assemble and cook on a pan, a cookie sheet or a sheet pan, and put it in the oven. This is very simple. You basically identify the vegetable you're going to cook, your protein, and then your tossed salad, because that's, of course, how you get your extra vegetables in. Your fruit and vegetable toppings, and then your extras, which are more of your plant-based proteins, complex carbs, high fiber options, right? And then you basically choose your combos, and you can use those kind of throughout the week. And everything is 30 minutes or less. And it gives you your cooking times for the types of food you're going to be preparing, and taking it from there. So this is one great resource. And we use this during the week just to make it very simple. One of our favorites is salmon, a bulgur, and Brussels sprouts, 30 minutes or less, right? And then we add a side salad, especially if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to, eat at home. Many of us eat at home during the week, and then we may go for, prayer at the masjid. So if you really want to say, I'm going to prep my food at home, I'm going to eat at home, what do my recipes look like for the week, and really simplify that process, this is a resource that could actually help. So I put that in the chat so you guys could actually see that. Any questions on this specifically? All right. All right, so talking about that, also talking about hydration, yeah, how do you hydrate, right? So it's really important. You're fasting all day. During your non-fasting hours, how to hydrate. So your water needs are going to be really dependent on your current health condition, right? So of course, if you have CHF or you're pregnant, your hydration needs are going to be very different. But for the most part, you want to make sure, and it's a very easy way to kind of calculate your water needs, hydration needs, is to actually take your current weight and divide by 2. And that'll actually give you the ounces, okay, that you would need for the day. So keep in mind that if we're hydrating, it's water. Yes, it's water, but your broth-based soups, your popsicles, coconut water, things like that also really contribute to your overall fluids. Okay. And then, of course, making sure that you take something with you. If you're going to the masjid, don't leave your water at home. Or if you have something specific that you combine for your hydration, then, you want to make sure that you have those on hand and you're taking those with you, especially if you're, adding electrolytes or something specific to your hydration strategy. There is one drink that actually comes from Prophetic Sunnah, and it's called Nabiz. You guys have probably already heard of it. But basically what it is it's dates, and specifically some people use majzoul, but traditionally it's ajwa dates, and it's actually soaked in water, right? And then it's consumed as a beverage. You can soak it for a couple hours, you can soak it overnight, but the point and purpose is that it is a beverage that actually contributes many electrolytes, right? So it's something that is practiced in some parts of the world. Some people do it here, but it's an added option for hydration that you might consider exploring. Are there any questions specifically? I'm actually going to drop my link for this in the chat, and you guys can just look at it if you would like to. Let's see, there it is. I think I posted about this a couple of days ago. I'm just gonna.
As you're doing that, I just want to say, because I'm really about to jump off, that I'm so grateful for this, because I was listening to Sheikh Saidi, Sheikh Imam Tijani's son this morning, and he was mentioning something about how with the Ramadan fast for, the devout fasters, that your body doesn't have or the same rights as it usually does, or like it doesn't have it doesn't have the same needs, I guess, as it usually has, right? But I think at the same time, it's important that we know that. But I think sometimes some Muslims kind of take the Ramadan spiritual benefits to an extreme as far as it comes to nutrition. And sometimes we overlook these things. And so, like, for example, if you're feeling weak and then you're trying to make Taraweeh prayer like I was the other day, but some people will continue on and then they end up passing out. So I'm just thinking about how it's really important that we do talk about just like the practical side of nutrition during Ramadan. So I really appreciate you for that, because we know that there's also great spiritual benefit as well alongside that. So I think that there's the need for a balance. So shukran, and may Allah increase you.
Alhamdulillah, may Allah increase you, Afwan. Thank you for helping to coordinate and share, inshallah. Have a great rest of your day, Aisha. That's a very good point she brought up. That there was a sister last night, and she came in and she wanted to do Taraweeh, and she was saying how she wasn't really feeling up to it, and she was having some difficulties, and she said, I don't know if I'm going to stay for the full 8, and I was like, oh wow, okay, well do what you're able to do, and she ended up staying, and she prayed them sitting down. Right. She felt, hey, that's how I'm able to do it. Right. That's my capacity at this time. Right. So it's really important that you're honest with yourself. You make your intentions. Yes, you make your intentions, but you also have to kind of reassess and check in. Right. As far as how you're feeling. Right. And know that Allah knows your intentions. Your intention was to do Taraweeh, and then inshallah you show up and you do what you're able to do. So I think it's very, very important that we check in kind of with our bodies too. Right. The Earth Friendly Recipe Roundup, this is a favorite. This is from pulses.org. And it basically gives you a lot of plant-based recipes that you can choose. You can pick and choose. You can kind of, look through them and identify options for very simple recipe meals that you can do during the week. And the cool thing about pulses.org is they are all plant-based. All of their recipes, they're either made from, dried peas or lentils, garbanzo beans, things like that. So I invite you to really kind of explore the pulses.org. And then they also have Instapot recipes, really looking for ways to really simplify the meal planning strategy to make sure you're getting what you need, but then you're not taking away from time to worship, right? So simplify the process, planning accordingly, and really kind of going from there. One last thing I believe I wanted to share, and this is around food waste, right? So as you know, it's Ramadan. Everybody cooks and we cook all of this food and we bring this food to the masjid, or we may cook at home, knowing that we might have 10 or 15 people, maybe for iftar, but we cook all this food. So we just want to kind of look at specifically, and this is out of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and also Feeding America, really just looking at how many people are actually food insecure in America, and then looking at how can we as Muslims, right, waste less food in Ramadan. All right, I'm just going to put it out there. So we go to the masjid, there's all this food left. What do we do with it? Okay, we can always say, hey, prepare less, but then you don't really know because you want to make sure that there's enough food. But then the question becomes, what's the plan for the excess or surplus food, right? Are we freezing it? Are we taking it home? Have we identified, people that we can give it to, right? So they can have food. I think it's important that we're also mindful about the food waste in Ramadan. If you want to take some home, that's fine. You can freeze it, maybe eat it for a meal later, but really just being more conscious and more intentional about the amount of food that we cook in Ramadan and the amount of food that actually goes in the trash, right? One thing that came up during a recent iftar is that they were doing plates and they didn't think about child plates, right? And smaller portions. So the kids were actually getting adult plates, and then the kids weren't eating all the food, and over in the trash goes the food, right? So really just being intentional and conscious about, how much we're prepping, making sure that we do have children's plates, and then looking at what we can do with any excess food. What does that even look like, right? I know last year we had cats. We had 2 cats. So if there was excess food or something like that, we gave it to the cats, or we went downtown, during MSA days, Georgia State, we were able to give excess food to some of the brothers in the park that, would benefit from the food. So whatever your strategy might look like, in an effort to be more green in Ramadan, we just want to make sure, that we're keeping that in mind and that we're trying, to just, be mindful and intentional and planning around that. The last thing I wanted to share is a good saying, and it's basically just kind of looking at kind of everything that we discussed today, looking at developing small, healthy decisions every day consistently, as far as our deeds and intentions, and looking, it has been narrated that the Prophet Muhammad SAW said that there are 2 blessings that are often overlooked by most of mankind, and that is good health and free time, right? So really, keeping our du'as up during the month of Ramadan, being intentional and planning accordingly, so that we can get the best out of Ramadan, especially when it comes to our worship, right? Identifying things that we can do to bring us closer to Allah in the month of Ramadan, or at least increase in remembrance of Him, inshallah. Well, I pray that you all have the best Ramadan. We're a week? Are we a week in almost? Alhamdulillah. And really just kind of go from there. If you all have any questions, any concerns, any requests for resources or information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, inshallah. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I pray you have a great rest of your week and a great rest of your Ramadan. May Allah accept. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much.
YaQutullah. One quick question.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all the information and your time. We appreciate it. Regarding when you fast, in the first couple of days, I know you mentioned about the adjustment period. Is it true that your immune system goes down a little bit in the first couple of days, or can you share anything about that?
So fasting, and thank you for the question. Fasting, there is an adjustment period when you fast. Fasting actually helps to improve your immune system, but there is an adjustment, right? And that may take a couple of days, right? I wouldn't say that it would decrease your immune system necessarily, but there is an adjustment period. But fasting, according to the research, it actually helps to improve or strengthen your immune system. It helps with cellular turnover and help to clean up kind of some of your, cells and things like that. So.
Alhamdulillah, shukran.
That's fine. Are there any other questions? All right, alhamdulillah. Well, thank you all. Inshallah, have a blessed rest of your day.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Appreciate you.
Alhamdulillah. Did you want to close out with Asr?
Bismillah.
والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين. السلام عليكم.
Ameen. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.